Who do we want to start with?
Spin the wheel.
All right, I'm spinning.
Spin the wheel. All right.
Green
spin the wheel.
Day.
Yep, that's a good call. I
That's
like
on
that.
Green
Let's
Day.
start with-
The OGs from NorCal.
So Green Day, we've talked about them a little bit. It's been a while. We settled on the first two albums that we thought were really good were ones that were formative for us, Dookie and then Insomniac, right? 39 Smooth is good, but obviously is young and they're not really polished, and there's some obviously misses there. It's 20 songs long, whatever. And then Kerplunk, similar. You could see them growing a little bit, but it's not a front to back by any stretch. Dookie is a front to back, like just a downright classic of a pop punk album.
Yep.
Put them on the map, made them household names for the first time. It ended up happening again 10 years later, but made them household names for the first time. And then Insomniac was just, another arm of Dookie, just another great, tight, front to back record, not a miss on it. And then Nimrod, right? Which none of us hate, but we have thoughts. Nate, you want to lead off?
Sure. Yeah, I'll lead off. This was actually one of my first concerts, at least for a major recording artist, was promoting this tour, Green Day, Nimrod, in Lewiston, Maine. At the time, kind of a crappy venue. At least it wasn't, they didn't keep up with the venue that much. So it was kind of like run down at the time. So I was stoked to see the band. And I remember this album and being pretty young. So obviously in retrospect, like I just liked anything. I didn't really have a whole lot of education on what was good, what was bad, what was semi okay. And looking back, like you said, Tone, on these albums for Green Day, this was, like you said, not a miss, but it wasn't really a, front to back. There's a lot of songs on here that I really like. You got Nice Guys Finish Last. Was that the first single? Can't remember.
First song too on the record.
Yeah, first song. So I feel like they were kind of still hanging on to their roots, which is great. I think you referenced 10 years later. So obviously American Idiot in 2004, they kind of changed altogether as a band. So I still feel like they were still true to what they were representing, which is, SoCal or NorCal punk rock. But yeah, this album's just not conducive to a listen through. And there might be a lot of elements to it. Maybe they were lost in their writing sessions, but it's also, it's 18 songs long. So there's that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
So for me, I think I agree. I think the length of it is my issue. I think it's there's 4, 5, 6 songs in the middle that kind of are similar. And like, if this had just tightened down to about 12 songs or 11 songs, as opposed to the 17, 18 that it was, 18, I think, I might have liked it more. I might have come back to it more. It's not bad by any stretch. It is kind of an extension of that Dookie Insomniac vibe, but it's not as good as those two for me. Like Nice Guys Finish Last is great. Hitching a Ride's really good. Redundant's a cool song, and that actually kind of leads them into more of the Warning sound, which comes out after this.
Yep.
I think it's headed that way. Obviously, Good Riddance was huge. It was their first not first, but probably mainstream hit. The other ones were more rock radio hits, Longview, Basket Case, etc. When I come around. But Good Riddance was like, who wasn't playing Good Riddance in 1998, right? It was everybody. So, but it's just there's enough filler there that it's like, okay, I can't listen to this front to back every time I come back to it like I would those other two. And that's why it doesn't get the 3-album run status. It's the roadblock.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree it's the roadblock. I'm probably not as high on this album as you guys are. The thing about this album, when you compare to Dookie and Insomniac, is the production changes big time on this album. Mm-hmm. I skimmed this album today because I obviously had this when I was 12 and probably liked it a lot. But the production, it's so polished that it takes away from the essence of Green Day. And this is the start. And I'm going to coin this term, Patio Slave coin term. This is the start of their arena punk era. Like this is arena punk, and they made those songs for that big stage. It's a whole different vibe. I think every song sounds the same. Every song has that massive driving drums that just carry the song. It just sounds the same. Has some good songs, like Nice Guys Finish Last. Actually, the first, 2, 3, 4 songs are good, but who's listening to a 50-minute Green Day album? Not me.
It's long. Yep. It's funny. The same producer for Dookie, Insomniac, and Nimrod.
I love the real-time
Yeah. Yep. Well, you said that, so I looked it up. I didn't know that off the top of my head, but Rob Cavallo, really, I mean, I think I agree with completely. And I love arena punk. That is perfect.
It's them. It's Rise Against. It's My Chemical Romance in the later half of the career.
Built for those the big stages they think they're going to get to, and did. I mean, Green Day did. My Chemical Romance did. Rise Against was fairly big, to name some of those bands. But yeah, that's a good. I hadn't thought of it that way, but in listening to it and then hearing you explain it, yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, it does. And actually, in retrospect, like Dookie, they played Madison Square Garden, right? So they were playing giant venues for Dookie 2 albums prior. But this album, and actually brings up a great point, because I wonder if they just always have the label pressure, because American Idiot is just all day arena stadium rock, right? It's just not supposed to, that's not small punk rock, small dingy venue like we were talking about earlier that are getting saved. Like, it's just not even, it wouldn't make sense. So this album for sure. And then even with the song Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, I mean, that was like the finale song for Seinfeld, the biggest sitcom at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And was it 98?
Yeah.
This album dropped in 97, so that kind of makes sense. But I wonder if if it was more label pressure, or if it's where they were. I mean, they definitely like changed on this album. And Insomniac and Dookie were straight up punk, So still a killer band. I like referencing that show that I saw for this album. It was more punk seeing that show than any other show that I saw after. And obviously they got even more commercial. Not that they weren't with Dookie, but I don't think they were trying, like to your point, Twan, I don't think they were trying to be commercial with Dookie and Insomniac. Nimrod, it seems like there might have been a little more pressure, and then American Idiot, obviously, it's...
Well, Warning's in there, too. You forget about Warning.
Yeah, Warning, too.
And Warning is a little more subdued, a little more laid back.
Yep.
Yeah, and almost at times folky punk, which is completely different than your arena punk, but they jump right back into the arena punk era, situation with American Idiot. My only thought there, in hearing you talk about it, Nate, is Nimrod does not have the cohesiveness that American Idiot does. American Idiot's a concept album, right? And
True.
There are some different, it's very polished. There are some very, very different sounds and thoughts on that record that we did not get with Nimrod, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I always consider or compare punk rock to like stand-up comedy. It's like you only have so much roadway. Like eventually it's going to get stale, or you don't fit the part because you're old now, or whatever it is. So I always wonder, like, being in a punk band must be extremely difficult, because even if you're super successful, you kind of have to like eventually go with the times. And maybe that's why they changed. I don't know how that works, but it's like you want to stay true to your core so you don't have a roadblock like this. But at the end of the day, like, you got to make a living. And I mean, I don't know. It must get super complicated. That's why I think Pearl Jam works, is because they just write timeless music, where Green Day might write timeless music, but they can't do it at their current age. They're a punk band. They're supposed to be young and vibrant, right?
Yeah, so. But I disagree with that. They couldn't do it, because they did do it. They went from writing Dookie in 1993, 94 to putting out American Idiot in 2004. Those are completely different wavelengths. Like, they're not.
Yeah.
But would you call American Idiot punk? You know what I mean? It's a whole different.
Exactly.
Yeah. True. Yeah. And that's what happens with punk. That's what happens with pop punk bands for sure. Punk bands maybe not so much, but pop punk bands for sure. They need to probably change sound or do something like American Idiot to stay viable in that genre, right? There are good bands that have done it. We've talked about the Menzingers. If you listen to After the Party, that's about turning 30 and not being a drunk idiot in your 20s anymore, like most of us are. So that's exactly what that's about. After the party. The party was your 20s. Your 30s, or you're going to be an adult. You got to like do normal things and not, you can't have 7 beers on a Tuesday night. It doesn't work like that anymore. So bands that can do that are really cool to me. They're few and far between in this genre for sure.
Nate, I'm going to call back to what you said earlier, which is, yeah, they did play Madison Square Garden or that size off Dookie, but guess what? That album was written before they were at that level. They never saw that true. Coming. They never. There's no way. I mean, I don't know. Like, what size venues were they playing off Kerplunk? I mean, clubs.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
Especially on the East Coast. Definitely clubs. So yeah, it's just a whole different. They were in a whole different stratosphere in their songwriting process, and that shows to me. It shows in Nimrod, where Insomniac was almost a throwback. I think they said "fuck you," like Jaded. There's nothing even like that on Dookie. Like, that's a throwback.
Good point.
Go to our core. Where Nimrod is we're getting older. Well, actually, warning is the word. Warning is that we're in our 30s album. I feel like I don't know what their ages were, but something happened. We like to say that something happened.
And you talk about Jaded. That's probably why Jaded wasn't played by itself. It was played at the end of Brain Stew on the radio. Like, screw you guys. We're gonna put it out as 2 songs. Then if you're gonna give us this 1.5 minute, jam, just absolute sprint.
Yeah, it's complicated. As fans, as music nerds, digging deep on what happened. We always wonder, like, what actually happened. We don't actually know. And we always wonder, like, is it the band or is it the pressure from the management, the label? Who knows? Would they continue to write albums like Dookie, or like you said, Insomniac was almost like going backpedaling in a lot of ways, which I think is great. Maybe that doesn't reflect well for the label. And they're like, well, you could have done these numbers, but you did that. So now look, it's working against you. Do you want 4 mansions or do you want 1?
Especially late 90s, right? Like when the money was just everywhere.
God damn, best economy ever. So yeah, I don't know. It's the punk thing just always is so perplexing because it's such a young thing. It's like not supposed to be longevity unless like you're like a Rancid, where like the music is very kind of on the same level throughout their whole career. Like Green Day is like up, down, sideways. And that's probably why they're one of the biggest bands on the planet. But as a true core Green Day fan, as we all are, we just have to be honest. And this is definitely a roadblock, unfortunately. And I think a lot of it has to do with the longevity of it, which I used to think was a bargain as a young kid. Like, oh, nice, I get 18 songs for $12 instead of 12 songs for $12. But yeah, now it's more of like the full piece, and there's a lot of filler, and it just doesn't hit like those first 2, especially Insomniac. Yeah,
it could be shorter.
So Nate, you remember when we discussed the Incubus Make Yourself album, where we kind of looked at release dates of singles and things like that? Well, I'm looking at the release dates for the singles off this album, and Nice Guys Finished Last was actually the last single released, and it was
Hitchin' a Ride first.
Hitchin' a Ride was first. The interesting thing is Nice Guys Finished Last came out 2 years after. So this tells me that in 99. So this tells me that this was intended to be milked. This was release an album, 18 songs, and tore the shit out of it. I feel like that was the play with this album.
Yeah.
Ooh, great assessment. I'm looking at it too right now, and it's like, we were talking about a few episodes ago about pre-COVID, like getting ready to promote an album, all the, things that go on behind the scenes, a world tour, merchandising, licensee deals, all that shit. 97 to 99. That's a good stretch of time to like milk the shit out of it in terms of revenue and all the things that go along with it. So yeah, you could be very much on point with that. I think you're actually right.
Something that makes me pause though is why release that song? Was that song even supposed to be a single? Because it was the lead off to the album, and anybody who listened to them at the time had heard that song a million times at that point because they own the album.
Right. And was this like a soundtrack play?
Right. I think it was. Maybe was it on a soundtrack? I think it was on a soundtrack too. I'm going to look it up.
It was.
I'm getting back into the bushes here. The Homer Simpson.
I'm pretty sure it was on a
Varsity Blues.
It was on a soundtrack. Was it Varsity Blues?
Yep, just pulled it up.
Yep. Yeah. So maybe they were like, "Hey, shit, let's throw this on Varsity Blues soundtrack and let's throw it out as a single." That's what it was. Yeah, because that was the first song. Yeah, exactly. Fucking tan.
Yeah.
Miss Davis, will you go to prom with me?
Twan, you're so on point. It's not even funny. This is a Deftones White Pony repress with back to school, because we can sell more records and work it into kids going back to school and play on that. And
I love that movie though. That movie's great.
We did. For which one? Varsity Blues?
Yeah, Varsity Blues is awesome.
Oh,
great movie. Yeah. And great soundtrack too.
Amazing soundtrack.
Yeah. Yep. Foo Fighters on there, a few others. Yep. Do you know what I did notice listening to this today? We talked about it with Greg. He brought it up when we brought up Green Day towards the end of episode 41, how Mike Dirnt is kind of the harmonizer for Billy Joe. I noticed it listening, and 2 things hit me. One, I heard it, which was like, somebody that I had talked to about music had said this to me. And then I heard it from Greg, which like, that was just made me smile. I was like, oh, Greg told me that. That's cool. That's awesome.
That is cool, because he knows the recording process. So it's like, that's very vital to the album sounding full, right? So
from the horse's mouth, from the musician's mouth, I was like, yeah, that's what Greg was saying. Oh wait, Greg told me that. That's really awesome. Like, I would not have thought of that otherwise. I've been listening to Green Day for 25 years. I would not have thought of that otherwise.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's the Jerry Cantrell of Lane Staley for Alice in Chains. Mike Dirnt to Billy Joe Armstrong.